Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. Do you have your pen and notepad handy? If not, grab that right now and make a commitment to yourself that you will jot down some notes and some sort of action item that you will implement in your business today. That's what this is all about, driving your business forward. Today I want to talk to you about a topic that I suspect will be a little bit controversial, or it'll come across in one sense pretty simple, and then in practice I think it might be a little more abstract, trying to work out. And so you are going to need to take some notes, and I want you to bear with me and think about this. I really think this would be a good exercise for each of you to endeavor to do in your business if you're not already doing that. And that is this. I want you to evaluate each and every team member according to the income or profit that they generate. Frankly, we're going to look at everyone in terms of profit. You know, payroll is for very many companies the largest expense. And since you and I can agree that all expenses should be viewed in terms of investment, then the next thing we have to agree on is that all expenses you want to consider your return on investment and your returns, including on each and every individual who is an expense. Now, when you think about doing this, there are some people on your team that it's really obvious for, and you're probably doing this for. Perhaps you have commission salespeople and you're thinking, oh, well, I know in the case of my commission salespeople how much profit they generate. That's something we look at. Or you have what is traditionally been referred to as productive employees. These might be some sort of technically skilled individuals that are involved directly in the production of the product or service that you market, that you sell to end consumers. And those people, like for example, maybe you have contractors, electricians, and you're selling their time, and then you pay them a certain salary or wage, and you sell that time that they exercise for your customers at a profit. And that's more intuitively practiced, I guess, universally among businesses that do that kind of thing. Even then, I would say to you, first of all, I want you to start comparing the return on investment of one to another. What is the relative return from one person to another within your quote unquote productive team and your income generating, those that are intuitively income generating part of your team? That's the first thing I want to get across, is that if you're not looking at how efficient they are, what the return on investment for contractor A versus contractor B, or consultant A versus consultant B, you need to be starting to look at that. So it's not just about, are they productive, yes or no, that binary, check a box. It's about how productive are they? How much income and profit? We're really actually talking about profit here. How much profit do they generate individually? So that's the first thing. The second thing, and this is where it becomes a little more complex, is I want you to do this for everyone, even those members of your team who would historically be thought of as not part of the income generating group, the what is traditionally referred to as the productive team members, the people who are not directly involved in creating the products or services that you sell to your customers. So you might have administrative personnel, or you have some sort of general labor, people that are involved maybe that support, their support staff, customer service, these types of things that maybe they're done, their roles take place after the sale, accounting. You think of all those people within your organization, or maybe even you have a type of production facility where people are involved in the production, but you've never taken the time to think about, well, how can you quantify what part of the profit generated by your whole business is responsible or can be attributed to and ascribed to certain individuals who are fundamental in getting you to be able to run as an operation, but it's not sort of a direct, there's not a direct line that you can say, well, this person produced widget A and we sold 5 of those, so he was responsible for 5 times the revenue of the widget and his expenses, so on. So like I said, this is actually simple in one way, but in practical terms, in execution, it gets a little more complicated. So I want to dig in with you and explore this. And of course, the idea of what we're doing here is just a mathematical equation. This just requires some calculations. And in the formula here, we have 2 sides of the equation. One is the profit, and the other is the expense, or rather, the revenue and the expense come out to the profit. So think about things in terms of the expense of each and every individual. So let's focus on, well, you can focus on anyone in your organization, but I like to spend it on the more difficult equations, the ones you probably haven't done, those quote unquote non-productive team members. And by the way, when we talk about the expense of somebody, you might think of, well, in my sales team, it's really obvious. They're commissioned and we've got it all factored in there. We pay them a portion of the profit that we generate, and that's how their commission is expensed. But it's a little more complicated than that. When it comes to the side of the equation, which is the expense, it's not just what you pay them. I want you to also consider and factor in employer contributions. So when you pay somebody a salary or a wage, depending on your geographical region in which you operate, you're also expected to kick in some other things, what we might refer to as source deductions or employer contributions, such as pension contributions, Social Security contributions, employment insurance contributions. Maybe there's other benefits that you offer, and those are above and beyond the simple salary or wage that you pay. So factor in those things as well. And then beyond that, there are other expenses such as the tools and resources that you make available to each of these individuals that are necessary for them to be productive. So maybe you have software licenses, you have hardware, you provide office space. All of these types of things have a cost associated with them. And to the degree that your business affords your people access to those things at your expense, you need to factor those in. Now, sometimes people are working in remote locations, and sometimes it's expected by your organization that those people take on those expenses themselves. Maybe somebody who comes to work for you within a particular industry is expected to bring his own tools with him, and you don't actually pay for those tools, maybe the uniforms, these types of things. But I want you to take a look at all of your expenses directly associated with each individual, and then those things that you provide to those individuals that you may not have been factoring into this sort of mathematical equation to begin with. So the cost of producing something per individual starts with figuring out, okay, well, what is the cost of this individual? And then the second part of that is to look at, of course, how much revenue they generate. And as I said a moment ago, I want to focus on those people that it's less intuitive. It's not a direct relationship. Those things that you think of, like the administrative or support personnel that you have, and you think, well, they're not involved in directly producing the product or service or selling it. So maybe you have an electrical company, electricians that go out, and you think, well, I can quickly figure out what my electricians make. But what about the receptionist who helps schedule those appointments and dispatches the work to them and everything? And you might think, oh, well, but we can agree that if that person in your way of doing business, your logistics, your operations, if you've determined that person is critical to be able to support the technicians who go out in the field and you're selling their time, this support staff is still an expense that you take on, and I want you to do this return on investment for the support staff as well. So that's where it gets a little trickier. Now, you might think, well, the one part of the equation is really easy. It's easy to figure out what I pay that person, and I have particular phone system associated with that person, and there's software licenses, and you can add that up. Now we get to this part where, okay, but how much income do they generate? And this is where you get stuck. This is what I see. A lot of businesses haven't done this because they don't attribute any income generation to support team members, administrative team members. And so today's topic is all about, well, how do you do that? And so what I want you to do is frame these people in terms of, what if they were outsourced? What if they did not work for your organization and you had to pay another company to provide those services to you? What would you have to pay? And many of these people's services and those critical functions that they fill, those tasks that they complete, are actually available to be outsourced. So start to think of those things, and you need to associate a value with each and every one of those things. Then you have to ask yourself, is there sufficient work? Is there enough tasks to keep them busy full-time or even part-time? Or is this something that they do that's sporadic, and maybe through a great deal of the day, they're not engaged in providing value to your organization, but you think of it as, well, I need the support team. I can't have my electrician answering the phones and then running out to the jobs. That's impractical. That's actually known as division of labor. And Adam Smith has described that. You're absolutely right. You will create wealth to the degree that you can engage in division of labor and keep people more and more productive. Divide up your whole operation, your whole production, according to where people will focus on their strengths, and they become more efficient, and you can get a lot greater economies of scale. So without getting too much into the division of labor, you have decided, either intuitively based on practicality or based on your understanding of division of labor, that you want to divide up your entire production, your operation, into certain tasks, so that you can keep those parts of your production, those people within your production system who are most productive, focused on those activities that they do that generate the most revenue. You're doing this. I know you're doing this automatically. If you're not, start doing this, by the way. But whether you made a conscious decision to do that, what you've in fact done is you've taken something off the plate of one person, and it's now somebody else's responsibility. That's a part of division of labor. But that expense, now what you're doing is you're incurring a new expense, and what a lot of managers fail to do is attribute that expense. In terms of accounting, is accrue that to the right department, accrue that to the right personnel. And that's where this exercise of thinking, what if I had to outsource it and it was a more obvious expense, how much would I pay for that? So think of that. So let's stick with my example of receptionist, for example. So let's say you decided you were going to use a phone service to handle your reception and your dispatch or whatever. How much would you have to pay one of these organizations? And I guess the first question you can ask yourself is doing that, would outsourcing that be less money? Would it be more cost effective or less cost effective than having the person in-house? And that's, again, part of asking these questions and really evaluating how effective this person is. Now, maybe you say, well, my receptionist doesn't just answer the phones, doesn't just dispatch the work. He also engages in some filing, and he helps with a little bit of janitorial around the office, and so on. And that's fine, good. So think of each and every one of those tasks, if you had to outsource them, and let's just say task by task, somebody was willing to do just a very small thing. How much value would you associate with that? How much money would you have to pay to get that service from an individual? And then add those things together, and that is sort of, you can think of that as you were paying this. Let's say this person, this receptionist, his name is Charles, and Charles has Charles Receptionist Services. He's a one-man operation, but he has Charles Receptionists and other outsourcing tasks services, and you hired him, and you're like, well, I'll pay you this much to answer phones, and I'll pay you this much to dispatch work, and I'll pay you that much for emptying the garbages and dusting the reception counter and whatever. Then I'm going to pay you this much for each file that you have to label and you have to put away or whatever. All of that stuff, you add that up and you think, okay, well, that's the expense. That's what you would have to pay individually to that outsourced service. And I know this mental exercise is a little bit challenging if you've never outsourced work, but we have a lot of experience in doing that kind of thing. And that's why this, I think, is more intuitive for me, and why I wanted to share this concept with you as a mental exercise, is this stuff is available. You can actually get individuals to do these things for you, and you can therefore, even if you're not going to do it, you can actually ascribe a certain amount. You can associate a certain amount with each of these tasks in terms of value of what you might have to pay. And then you think of that as the income that that person is generating. As I said, this gets a little tricky when you try to do the mathematical exercise. It's not quite as simple. So bear with me. Let's go through this. Let's slow it down here and think about this. So now, in terms of my example of Charles's reception and other task fulfillment business, is Charles running a profitable operation or not? In my example, Charles is charging for all these tasks and he's generating however much revenue, and Charles has all the expenses associated with your business that you found that part of the equation much easier to calculate. The software he's using, the tools that he has to be able to do all these tasks. That part of the equation is much more simple. But now what we've done is this mathematical exercise where we added it up, and is Charles a viable, profitable business? Yes or no? That's what we're looking at here. If the answer is Charles is not, then well, you have to go back to your math and ask yourself, were you being honest? Because let's say the amount that you were assigning in terms of value for each of those things you think is pretty accurate, and that's what you could get that for in the open free market by hiring a freelancer to do these things or whatever. Well, then maybe you want to do that. Maybe you say, it's time for me to start outsourcing. You might have a revelation here, go, whoa, why do we have Charles employed doing this when we can do this another way for less money? But you may also have just not estimated correctly. You might have thought, well, I lowballed how much value there is associated with that. And if you could not hire another company to do that for you for the cost of Charles, I want you to think about the actual market price for the services that Charles, your support team member, is providing to your business. What is it on the free market? Forget about what you're actually paying him. That's on the expense side of things. If this was an independent business, what would you have to pay to get those services? And that's what you need to be ascribing to that. That's what you have to assign in the mathematical equation here. I hope that made sense to you. Now what you have to do is, now let's say he's profitable. Like you're looking at it and you're like, okay, yeah, actually for an answering service, I would have had to pay however many dollars, and for janitorial to just do those few things, I would have had to pay this much as on top of that. And you come up with this sum of how much, and that exceeds, for the sake of argument, what it costs for Charles. Now what you have to do is you have to figure out where to expense that to. Like we already talked about, there's a division of labor here. You're not having your electrician answer the phones and dispatch the work and do the janitorial or the filing, because that's not good use of the time. You can make more for your business by having the electrician engaged in his specialized trade, selling his specialized knowledge and time. You can be more profitable that way. But your business has made a conscious decision to do that. You have to assign that expense somewhere. So what I might suggest is maybe you are not assigning enough expense when you have calculated the cost of your electrician and how profitable he is. Are you assigning that expense of the support staff to him? Did you follow that? Is Charles's services should be expensed to the production in some way, because the electrician doesn't have to answer the phones. He doesn't get that service for free. Your business doesn't get it for free. So why, when you're calculating, remember this is all just accounting, why when you're calculating that, would you not ascribe those or attribute those expenses of your, in my example, receptionist of Charles, to the electrician, the cost of the electrician? And now what happens is, because his expenses go up, your electrician's expenses go up, you realize, okay, well, he's not as productive or as profitable as an employee as I otherwise did. That's a way that you have to do this to make sure that all of your personnel have a fair equation. I don't know if this made sense to you. Another way to look at it is to say all of those support staff, administrative, all of those non-productive, non-traditionally thought of as income generating roles within your organization need to be priced into your products and services. You understand that as a manager. As a business owner, you know that all of your expenses need to be factored into your prices. What I'm telling you today to do is make sure that you are accruing those in the right way. You're thinking about them. I keep using attributing or ascribing them to the right place. And since we are breaking this out, not just in one giant financial statement, income statement, in which you're looking at your organization as being profitable or unprofitable, what is the overall return you're getting on all your investments of expenses? The whole purpose of doing this is to be able to evaluate each and every individual, each team member that you are paying as a separate component, because that will help you to zero in as a manager on those things that you're not getting a good return on, those investments in people that you're not getting a good return on. And then you can work with them. You can strategically plan as a manager what to do. Should I be outsourcing this instead? Should I have this person on more valuable, this part-time or full-time employee that I have, should I have them doing other tasks? Is this silly? Some of the things I've got them doing, is there a better way that I can accomplish those tasks more cost effectively? You really need to, I think the trickiest part of this for the average individual viewing this who is not doing this is to, again, ascribe the cost of support personnel to the expense of productive personnel, of those people who are much more directly related to creating the product or service. In my example that I've been using, the electrician or the sales team member. Because without that support team member doing it, this person would have to do it himself, or you would have to do it. And for goodness sakes, you as the manager should be working on much more important things that you would typically have to pay someone, right? If you had to pay a manager to come in and manage your business, you'd have to pay a lot of money for that versus somebody to do the odd janitorial task. You have to figure out where each of these things that people are doing for you, where that expense belongs and to whom you have to attribute it when you work out this equation of how profitable is this person. And I think most of you are failing to do that. One other example I would give you is, let's use my same example of an electrician here. What if you had one electrician that was employed full-time internally by your company, and you had another that was a subcontractor? He did work for you from time to time, and he covered his own expenses. He has his own computer, he has his own cell phone, he has all his own equipment and everything. You don't cover anything. You just pay him a flat fee. And actually, he even somehow, I can't think of a practical example of how this would work, but he doesn't rely on any of your office space or your dispatch system or whatever. Somehow he just covers things. Maybe he covers a particular territory, and or he covers that. Here's a good example. He covers a particular account and he has a relationship with that account where they just call him directly whenever they need him, and you handle the invoicing or whatever. I guess there's some software and things involved in that, and then you pay this individual directly. You could see in the two examples the outsourced electrician is costing you less because he's not relying on any of those things. Now, not necessarily he's costing you, he might charge you more. He might say, well, you have to pay me more. In fact, he probably would. And you might say, actually, that's the best way to look at this, is if that outside contractor said to you that he is going to demand $1,000 for the amount of work that you could get your inside guy to do for $750, that $250 difference there is likely what that outside contractor has figured in terms of overhead for running his own business. And he's like, it's not worth it. So there's a market signal to you. And so that's another way to look at this. I want you to look at this a whole bunch of different ways. As I'm staring out there into the abyss and talking to you about this, it's hard for me without feedback to know where I may have lost you or what isn't making sense about this. So I don't want to beat a dead horse and work on this too long today. I want you to think about this, and that's today's homework. Start to look at this. Start somewhere. Can you evaluate your return on investment for each and every individual? Who in your organization is not profitable? And come up with that, and then look at that. Once you've done this, you can refine this over time. You should have no expenses that aren't assigned out to individuals as part of the production, because every little support team member you have is a cog in the overall machinery of production, producing your products and services. And the degree to which you need them, therefore, their expense needs to be allocated somewhere else that you are thinking of as being the profitable part of your organization. You need to look at each of these things and see if they are profitable unto themselves. And I think really that's where I need to leave it today. You probably have some questions about this. I may need to record another video or two to help you go through this. Maybe I can have some visual aids and some of the examples I can put up on the screen, and that might be more helpful. But make sure you give me some feedback in the comments so I can know what things made sense and what things need a little bit more clarification and elaboration. And everybody else who reads your comment is going to learn from it, because we need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.